Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. And today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to code in Python in X amount of minutes. I actually don't know how long this is going to take, so I'm just trying to. I'm basically just going to take a curriculum from an online source, Code Academy. It's a pretty good website, and they teach it very well. But the only problem with it is that it's actually paid for. It costs $240, and they go on 50% discount all the time. But for now, I just want to use that curriculum to help teach you guys how to code in Python just very quickly. So, honestly, this is more of an overview of Python because I still think you would have to go on to a real website to learn everything exactly. This is just kind of an overview. And even though it's just an overview, I really recommend that you guys watch this video because it could help you guys at least understand what you're learning when it comes to the point that you have to learn. So, first of all, I'm sure most of you guys don't have an IDE, which is just a code editor, because I'm sure most of you guys are just barely starting out with programming. And if that's the case, here are four good code editors in the web that you guys could use for Python. And this doesn't even need you to download anything. You could just go to the websites. So right here we have trinket.io. This one it's really lightweight. It's very simple. The only problem is if you do something, there's not a lot of syntax highlighting, which you'll see later on, and which is very helpful. And also, this doesn't give you any autofill stuff. But besides that, it really um, it's pretty good to just start with. Um, and the console is just right here. You don't even need to. It's not too complicated. You just run it and you're good. Now another one is Replit, I believe. Yeah, Replit. Now this website is honestly a lot better, but I feel like it has a lot of things they have to deal with. You could see right here you have files, which is really nice, and right here if we create a variable, it has it this right here it autofills for you. And this one is it has a shell which you could use for more complicated projects, and it has a console as well, which is very simple, just like over here with Trinket. This website is online GDB. I'm not sure exactly what that stands for, but the problem is this is very complex. I feel like right here it has the terminal, which it I feel like it's too much for no reason. Honestly, I this is the one that I least recommend, but if you want to go with it, then go ahead. And then of course we have vscode.dev, which is basically just VS Code in the browser. The only problem with this one is that although it's very good, we could see um uh, well, I guess there's that variable is equal to 7. It has nice syntax highlighting. Um the problem is it has very good uh, autofill. The problem is though when you run it, which actually I have not tried. Uh, I think I could just do it right here. Well, never mind. I'm not even gonna try that. This is pretty complicated. I feel like, especially if you're starting out. So I really recommend Trinket or Replit. Um, And for this, I'm actually going to use replit because I low-key need the syntax highlighting. So again, this is going to be a very, very fast tutorial. So let's get started. So to start off, we need to know how to write something in the console. So let's do hello world. If you use the keyword print and surround it with these parentheses, it will print whatever is inside. But as you could see, it doesn't have the quotation marks. And that is because the quotation marks indicate that this right here, hello world, is a string. The reason we need that, I'll show you in a second. So basically, there is a few different data types in Python or in any programming language. But first, I want to show you guys how to declare a variable. So a variable, you just name it whatever you want and give it a value. So hello, and we could even do um, variable 2. And we don't even need to have variable in the name. We could say hello and set that to just an exclamation mark. And so basically these are variables that if we use that print keyword again, let's print hello. While we would expect it to return the word hello, it's actually going to return the value of the variable, which is right here, the exclamation mark. And there it is. So now, um, as I was saying before, those are what are known as strings. So we have the string hello. And then as I was saying about other data types, we have integers, which are literally just numbers. Any single number is an integer. Something else that we have specifically in Python, let's name it floats. I'm not sure if it is in if it's specifically called a float in other programming languages, but if there is a decimal, then it is referred to as a float, and that is because of decimals having this weird thing called it's a it's a floating point number. I'm not exactly sure how to explain it all, but you guys can look into that yourselves. Um, and I believe those are the three main data types. Integer, yeah, float. Okay. These are the main ones that we're going to be working with. So you guys have now already completed just the first part of the Codecademy uh, syllabus, I guess, curriculum. So next we are going to learn about control flow. So if this word is very important, you could read right there what it says, but this keyword will check if something is true. Now let's say if integers, which we are calling on this variable, is equal to 8, or rather, no, let's start off with 7. Then we use a colon mark and print it is true. Now, the problem with this, though, I purposely did this wrong. Right here, a single equals symbol is to assign a value. Right here, we are assigning 7 to integers, but we are getting an error because it has the if keyword right here. The way we want to compare it is with two equal signs. So now I'm just going to delete this print hello world just so that we could stop getting hello world up there. But so now if we're running, we could see it is true. Now, if we were to change that 7 to an 8, we could see nothing happens because this isn't true. So let's see. The next keyword that we're learning, which always goes after an if keyword, is else. So let's say else print is false. So right here, we are checking if this is true. Else, so if this is true, do this. Else, or in other languages, I've seen it say no, I forgot. There's another keyword for other languages, but you kind of think of this more as otherwise. So if integers is equal to 8, print it as true. Otherwise, print it as false. So let's see what it is false, because integers is actually not equal to 7. So one last thing we could do is, okay, it is 8. We could also create L if. So with elif, it's like an else statement, but also an if statement. So now we could add um, something for the code to check again, basically. Integers, check if integers is equal to 6. Int it is 6. So right here, we can see that both of these are false. So now if we run the code, it'll still say it is false. But now if we were to change it to 6, it recognizes that this is false, but this is true, so it prints out it is 6. And then if instead we did 8 right there, then it would recognize that this is true before even going to this statement right here. And that becomes very important when you start doing things like this in more complicated pieces of code, because this is going to be checked first, then this is going to be checked first, or then this is going to be checked afterwards. If it was, so for example, let's say it is not 6. So if we run this, we can see that it prints out both of them. And if we have an elif statement instead, it's going to see that this one is true and finish the entire else if statement. So that's something to keep in mind when creating more complicated projects. So that's control flow, the second part of the um, Code Academy curriculum. I'm just stealing. Don't. I hope I don't get like in trouble for this or something. But next we are going to learn about lists. So let's name it my list. We create a list with a bracket symbol, basically. The two square brackets. So if we print my list, it'll return this. Now, that was kind of obvious, but we could have a list of numbers. So 3, 7, 13, let's say, right? So it will print out all of these. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be numbers. It could also be string. So there we go. So you can see it all printed out right there. But now if we want to get a single value from the list, we could call its index in square brackets again. So an index is just where in the list it's at. So if we do 1, we would expect to get 3. Problem is we get 7 because indexing in most programming languages begins at 0. So right here we could see this is 0, 1, and 2. Something that could be helpful is the keyword len, as in length. So we could check the length of my list. We could see that it has, sorry, let's get rid of this for a second first. We could see that it has 3 items in the list. So yeah, that is something that is pretty helpful sometimes when creating for and while loops, which we will be getting to next. So just real quickly, I want to show you guys one last thing. We have a keyword called .append. So to the list, we could add the value. Let's add world just to complete hello world. So let's print my list twice. So now if we print it, you could see the first time around, it doesn't, it's just a simple list. But if we use the append keyword, then it will add world. There's more keywords that you could use. I would recommend looking on W3 Schools, which is a simple website to show you a lot of things having to do with programming. Just search up list functions and you'll get them in Python, of course. So then we could also reassign things like my list 0 is equal to 19. So if we run it, we'll see it's 19 now instead of 3. There's a delete keyword, but I forgot how to use it. I don't use that keyword very often. But yeah, there it is. So next up is, let's just real quickly change this to 13. Next up is loops, for loop. So what we could do for a variable, usually, well, this actually isn't supposed to be a variable that has already been called on before, but usually when using just a throwaway variable, we use the variable I. We could honestly do for num in, we use the in keyword, my list. So there it is. It's that simple. For num in list. You could practically read that. For a number in my list, let's print that number. So it goes through the list. First, it goes to 3. So for num in my list, the first time around, it'll check the first num and it prints it right there. It saves it to that variable. Now, again, generally we use the variable I when we're just using it like to throw it away later on. But yeah, we could also do things. This is very helpful. So like, um, we could call on the thing right here. We could, for example, we could actually do new list is equal. So we could say for I in my list, we want to append it to new list. Append I, just so that we could have a new list uh, with the same values um, as my list. Now, obviously, that would be um, pretty pointless, but I just wanted to real quickly show you guys a shorthand version of this. We do new list I for I in my list. So what we're doing right here, we're saying add the variable I for each of it inside of my list. And if we just, I'm going to comment this out. By the way, comments are done with hashtags. They're not seen by when the file is executed. These lines aren't read. So there we go. We could do that. But anyway, another thing that could be important is um, the enumerate keyword, which will return 2 values. So we have to do, right here do for index and then value. So now if we do this, we could print x plus plus. So right here, also I forgot to mention, we could use plus signs to, obviously we could do math operations like 8 plus 3 or times 3 minus 3 divide by 3. and there's a special one called modulo, which basically finds a remainder after dividing it by 3. Or sorry, no, yeah. Um, so 8 modulo 3 would be, I believe, 2, because after dividing 8 by 3, we have 2 left over. And then, for example, we're going to get a decimal if we do it like this. If we do 2 of these together, we get its rounded value, rounding it down. And then also another thing that I wanted to show you is um, integers plus equals 3, and basically this will return, I believe, 11, because uh, plus equals will just add this number to this existing value. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. And if we were to run this, we get an error because integers and strings cannot be added together. So that's why we have an str keyword to convert it into string. And yes, there's an integer keyword and a float keyword as well. And so there we go. We could see at index 0, the list has 3. And basically, enumerate could be used in many ways, more than just this, that I do not have time to show. So next, we'll see while loop, which we do while. Let's create a variable called count right here, which is equal to 0. While count is less than 5, print um, print hello, and then count plus equals 1. Again, that will add 1 to count. So while count is less than 5, we will print hello world and then add 1 to count just so that it goes up again. So like this is very important so that we don't just do it infinitely, which could that takes up too much space, I believe. Um, but yeah, while loops could, while something is true, we could do this. We could also do while true, and I'm actually not going to run it. Please do not run it because this will just run infinitely, and we do not want that. So it's that simple for while loops, but they could become very important later on. Uh, all right, so next up we have functions. So def is a keyword that defines a function. So let's call it my function. We need these parentheses, and you'll find out why later. So a function is used for creating a set of things that you want to uh, a, a chunk of code that you want to reuse over and over in the program. So let's do int. This is my function. So now we could do if we call my function parentheses, it will do what's in there. And what's so now basically instead of printing this is my function and typing that out many times, we could just call my function. So generally, when it comes to creating functions, we do not actually print things out, or you can. It could be helpful, but we use the return method or the return keyword. So we could say hello world, and now if we run my function, nothing happens because while it returned hello world, we did not store its return value anywhere. So if we were to instead print it, we are going to be printing the return value. Now, I wanted to emphasize this because it's something that I did not understand until much later. So what we could do is function um, value, right? So function value, and let's um, set it to my function. So while you would probably expect the function to now be called function value, it actually just sets that return value to the value of function value. So now if we were to do that, it still prints hello world. Um, that's actually very important. I remember writing a terrible piece of code that would call a function inside of a function, and I never knew that return didn't actually print it out. So the reason you would want to do this is maybe, okay, in here we call the temporary um, variable of x. Um, no, actually, I have to add in a parameter. So parameters are variables that you create when you call a function. So let's call this parameter x. A parameter is just a variable. So now what we could do is do x plus equals 3 and return x. So now um, let's print my function. If we were to run this, we get an error because it is missing an argument right here. So a function always needs an argument. You can see right there. Actually, you could even do, I believe you could do that, so that now in here, just give it a second. Hold on. Here we can see that it wants us to put in x as a string. No, want it as an integer. Now this right here isn't required. I just want to show you it because it's very helpful when creating functions that you're going to use later on. And it just oh, see right here it gave us, okay, wow, okay, right here it gave us a this is just because when you're using a function in a big project, you're going to want to let other people know what is going to be returned from the function, or rather what you need to input for a function. Because for example, if we input hello, it's an error because, well, right here, because we wanted an integer. But now if we run it like this, um, you can't add a string and an integer. Meanwhile, if we add 7, we are getting the value 10. This 7 is going in through here. So now it's the variable x. This variable, again, is still equal to 7. Now right here, we are adding 3 to it, and we are returning that final value. And that's how we get 10 right there. So yeah, again, we generally want, or in big projects, you do want that to indicate that it's going to be only an integer being returned or uh, entered. And then I believe we could do, right, so I tried to do something and it actually did not work. So just going to ignore this real quick. Oh no. Okay. Never mind then. Oh. Uh so yeah, right here it's best to let the people using your function to know that you want an integer. And hold up. If we enter a float, do we get an error? Okay, we don't get an error. But this is just to tell them, like, hey, we really strongly recommend they use an integer, because if you don't, well, the function isn't going to work correctly. So next up, well, in here we could do all sorts of operations, and the thing is, we don't even need to call it x. So let's say first, rather, 1, 2. So now let's do num1 plus num2. So this function is going to be adding these two numbers together, and we could just do this right here. And there you go. You can now create a simple addition function that you could use across your entire code if you really wanted to. So honestly, there's giant functions that you could create that will return something very convenient. I'll be displaying this more in depth in an upcoming video, but this is basically really all about functions. But the other thing about functions is, let's say we call a variable or no, sorry. Actually, yes, no, integers. Hold up, give me a second. What if, okay, we ignore the parameters and we return integers? Here's the problem. We get an error because integers is not defined. Now, we see integers defined up here, but the problem is when building a function, it does not know about anything out here. So integers does not exist inside of the function. Now that could become very useful for a whole lot of reasons. Um, and it could become very annoying for a whole bunch of reasons. And that is why there is a keyword that I'm going to teach you guys about, but I want you guys to never use it. Or rather try to never use it. Oh, sorry. Okay. You guys are probably confused right now. Integers. There we go. Yes. Now if we do this, oh. Well, that's convenient. It never did that for me. Huh. Sorry, hold up. Now I'm curious about something. Num plus integers turn num. Wow, that's really interesting. So, I may have been wrong. Let me just. Wow. I'm sorry about this. Okay, so turns out I was wrong. You can use variables outside of the scope of the function. So I may have been wrong. No, actually, I just remembered what it is. So if we do integers plus equals num, and we do return integers, here we go. Sorry, wait. Yeah, see right here, it won't allow us to do something like this. While yes, we could use I don't know why only works one way, but we cannot affect the variable integers outside of this function scope. So at first that's like, that's annoying, but it's it is pretty helpful. And the way to get past it is using the global keyword followed by integers, followed by the variable, and now we could affect the variable across the entire file. Problem with this, using the global keyword will make it so that integers is also usable in this. Sorry, let's do new.py. Now, if we call integers here in new.py, which is a different file, integers, or sorry, I believe we have to something like that. I don't know. We could call it in that um it was something about you could call the variable in another file or something like that. I don't know, it becomes messy. Just don't use the global keyword unless you absolutely have to. The next project I'm going to teach you guys is actually going to use a global keyword a lot, but after that I'm going to show you guys an alternative to that which is very helpful. And for now we're just going to, skip over that. And yeah, another thing is, yeah, if we define a variable x is equal to num plus 3 and we return x, you can see that it does that there. But now if we were to print x itself, x is not callable outside of the function because it is a local variable. um, so yeah, that's functions. I'm sure I missed so much more. it, Functions is a whole big thing. It's really, really nice though. Now, apparently in Code Academy, it teaches strings. So, real quick, string 2 is equal to world. And now, if we were to print, if we do string 3 is equal to string plus string 2, and we print string, we will see string 3. Sorry, there we go. We will see that you could add them together. That's called concatenating. And so that's simple. All right, up next, modules. So modules is it it's okay. So basically there's a whole bunch of what we call libraries or modules, which are helpful files of code that you could import to your code to use those um, uh, uh, to use everything available in that. So let's say if in here we, um, I don't know, let's call it my variable is equal to 32, and then my string is equal to, um, say, let's say, Python. That took so long to think about, but basically we could use the import keyword to import new. So what we're doing here, we're importing this file. So now what we could do is print new. We're calling that file dot. We're calling a instance inside or an object from inside the file. So let's say my string. So if we run that, it does Python as if it was this exact variable. Now the thing is, if we run print my string just like that, it's not going to work. Although, using new.mystring is going to get messy or look messy. What we could also do is from new import my string. So now we don't need to say new because we imported the string without needing to use the keyword or sorry, the file name. So now if we print my string, it just works like that. Problem is we can't print what did I call it? My var. Okay. We can't print my variable. In fact, we can't print it at all because we didn't even import it. We imported my string on its own. Now, if we instead were to say um, import new, uh, my var works, and my string works. So what if we want to use both of them without using the new keyword? So we would have to say from new import star. Star basically means all. So now we could do run my string, and we could also do um, my variable, and both of them work. The problem is we do not want to do this most of the time because it becomes very messy, because now if we give a new value to my var, it's going to change the value and it messes everything up. But so some cool things that you guys can look into is um, time uh, and random. Those are two very good ones. In Trinket.io, you could actually see the modules right here. These are generally used everywhere. Uh, Matplotlib is for creating plots. Math is used for math. NumPy is used for math mostly, but it's very helpful. I really recommend you guys look into this because it creates a different type of list, which is actually very um, used in other programming languages. There's random, of course, very good one. Regular expression, which pisses me off, but it's pretty all right. Um, time is another good one. Turtle lets you draw on the screen. But yeah, there it is. That is modules. Um, there's not too much to go into there unless I want to make this even closer to an hour than it already is. So next we are going to learn about dictionary. So say my dictionary, we use brackets like this, curly brackets. Generally we want to do it like this, and what we could do, um, let's hello with the value world. So basically, before you guys try this out, what I could do is call this like a list. The only difference is this isn't a list, so we are going to, this is basically the index. So, well, and it will print world. So you could basically do this. I don't know if you could say high like this and then 7. I actually haven't tried this before. Okay, yeah. So it has to be a string. The reason for that, actually, oh, there we go. We need to have a comma to separate every single one of those. But the reason for that is because right here, we could pass in variables. So we could set, the user could be doing a whole bunch of stuff, set a variable, change a variable, basically the user, and then we could input that variable in here. So maybe we wanted to get hello at one point or hi. Actually, a good way of doing this is user data. Well, maybe not exactly, but that's like one way we could do this. So user one, let's just do user one pass and the password user two word, and then user three. So let's say this user wanted to access their password. We'd say user, and then user is equal to, let's say we take an input from the user and then set it to the value that they input. So let's say, oh, I'm user 2. So when we do that, it will give us a word because user is equal to user 2, which is the key for the value word. So there you go. That's dictionaries. Very simple. Very, very useful. I used it a lot for my data science class. Um, So next is files. Um, so basically, you could create text files, right? So test.txt. You could write in here and everything, and basically, I don't want to get into it too much because I feel like it's sort of a big thing, um, but it is um, basically you could read and write the file using only Python. So that becomes very useful. Again, I used it for data science, but I used it for creating like mock databases as well. For small projects, it's not secure, so don't actually use that um, for something real. But it is there if you want to use it, and you can search it up in W3 schools. Now, the reason I was reading very weirdly is because I am looking for the next part of learning Python with Codecademy. So, um, honestly, I believe that's pretty much it, except for one last thing, which is classes. Oh, I could go on and on about classes. Right, so I have been struggling for a little bit. I started setting up a class. I'll explain this in a second. I just didn't want to waste your guys' time with my 5 minutes of trying to figure out what was wrong. So when calling or creating a class, we use a class keyword, name the class, create a function. This always has to be the first function, um, called init. Or inside classes, it's like a combination of functions, basically. That's not exactly what it is, but that's what you put inside of a function. So init, it just initiates it. You're going to need the self keyword, and then you could define the function. So basically, the function is just what you want to happen when the class is initiated. Right here, we are creating a variable called 3. So now if we print my var, we get an error. If we print self.myvar, we get an error. And if you haven't already guessed, it's because it is in this local scope and we can't call it globally. So what we could do, my class, or rather, you'll see. So we could do my class dot uh, my var, right? So you would expect that to be working. And no, it actually doesn't. The reason is because we have to call the class kind of like a function. Now, if you run this, it works. Problem is actually right here. Now, let me explain these functions. We have var.val, which just returns the variable's value. We have add1, which just adds one to the value. And then we have this, which I will get to in a second. So right here, let's actually instead do self.myvar plus equal 1. And it has no return value. Let's call the function add1, right? So we're calling the add1 function from the myClass. So now if we run it, of course it returns none first of all, and then let's do my class dot my var, right? So actually, real quick, let me just do return. If you leave it empty, it doesn't return none. Oh, it's okay. So we can see it's 3. Why is it still 3 though? And that is because we are calling the um, class just like this. We're not supposed to do this. Class instance. That's a very long variable name. let's just call it CI. So class instance is equal to my class. So basically what we're doing here is we are calling, basically setting everything inside of my class to CI. But the thing is, now all of this will be able to get saved. So now if we call the add one function, um, and look at the variable, it actually gets us, oh, sorry. It's a function, so we don't even need a, it doesn't have a return value. So yeah, if we call the add one function and then call the variable, we can see this time it did add four, or sorry, add one and create it into four. So if we did that, this time it's actually saving all inside of the CI variable. So that is something very important to know. We have to call an instance of the class. Now, if we were to instead do return self dot my var plus one, and we printed say dot add one, it would just return the it would not affect the obviously, because I have a plus sign right there. So what we could do here again, I don't know if I mentioned this already, but self is just supposed to always be a parameter so that we could use things inside of the class instead of calling the class name and then the variable right here, or the class name and the function sometimes. Because what we could do right here, uh, var val, and that would actually still work. Sorry, um, like this, it would still work because well, it's returning, the value. So yeah, self right here just makes it so we could use variables and functions from within the class inside of itself, basically. So so what we could do actually is, and yes, we don't even need a parameter in there, but because it practically ignores self for the um, in the parameters. But let's say we have a parameter x right here, and then return self dot var value plus x, right? So let's do this one, add x. If we leave it blank, of course we will get an error because it still needs x. And yes, it says it only needs one argument because self is somewhat ignored. So if we say 3, we get 6, and there you go. That's how you could use, yeah, that's how you could use a function with while taking input. Now what we could do too is when creating um, the class, we could um, have it require we could input our own value to set these values right here when the class is initiated. So we are inputting 7, and it goes all through there. So now if we were to run this and we add 3 to 7 in the first function, we get 10. We call the variable, we get 7. This is a very watered down version of this. I don't know if this is the exact same way that I talked about classes in my last tutorial about classes, but it's the best I could do for now. And trust me, I am going to explain it way better in a future video when I start creating a project with classes. So next, and the final thing is input. So if we do input, there we go. That's all it does. So we could say, what is your name, right? This parameter, it'll be printed right there. So let's say, right, it just ends right there. And so generally what we want to do right here is do /n. /n makes a line break. Oh, wrong slash. Let's run it. And so we could say, there we go, put my name right there. And that's it. But we could put it into a variable. And now, yes, this still does nothing. But now what we could do is we could print hello. And let's do this. I'll explain what this is in a second. Hello. Let's do it like that, right? So the reason I created this is because there's a function called .format, and inside here we could call name, call that variable, and basically it will replace the brackets, the curly brackets, with that variable. So we could say it's basically another way to concatenate a string, and so there it is. So we could say that, and then just to add on to .format, how is your and we could just do something like that, right? And then, oh, actually, sorry, we would need another argument right here. If we want two like this, or we could do 0, calling the first one in the format from the format argument. And if we do that, okay. Or we could again do that. Um, a, say a is equal to Friday. And so if we add in the argument day, there you there you go, and that's how it works. That's how concat or dot format works. I showed you guys how input works. Again, if you guys didn't understand input, let me just print what comes from the and there we go. Basically, this is helpful, so it'll be helpful in my future projects that I'll be teaching you guys. But yeah, it's just to get user input. So there we go. That's basically it. Um, of course, there's a few more advanced things that you could do, but this is the basic stuff. And honestly, this is just kind of an overview again. So if you really want to uh, learn everything in more depth, I would recommend an online resource. I don't know. You guys could use Code Academy. That costs money though. There's Solo Learn, which really helps as well, and that one's free. Honestly, I would very much recommend that one because it's also shorter, but you could still understand it very quickly. Um, so one last thing I want to show you guys is Code Wars. So this is basically a website where you have to create functions. Basically, let me look. So this is one of them. So opposite number is one of the things right here. Basically, they enter a number and they want you to return its opposite. Um, this website basically is for challenges. Right here, I give my friend this challenge. Uh, so this is the function, and they use this function themselves to test it. So the opposite function, they'll input a number. This is our solution. 0 minus a number will always be the opposite of the number, negative or positive. And it will return number. We return number, and basically it works. It gives you the opposite of the number that they input. there's more complicated stuff like this one that I did. You guys can look at it if you understand it. Um, oh yeah, uh, yeah. You guys, I would really recommend this website because the thing is, when it comes to creating code, when writing code, I remember there's a time where I thought I didn't know anything. I thought what I had learned was pointless and that I was still a beginner. Um, Kind of imposter syndrome. It wasn't that bad, honestly. I just never really created any programs, but honestly, all those things that I just showed you are literally everything you have to know. And I would say that you're an intermediate at Python already. Um, if you know those stuff like by heart, then sure you're more advanced. But this website really puts your knowledge to the test, and it really helps you honestly to realize your worth when coding. But yeah, it's a fun website. Anyway, um, thank you guys so much for watching. Um, I'm going to be creating 2 more videos on tutorials on how to make 2 very, very well sized projects, which will be kind of a game inside of the console. And you guys will be able to learn functions as well as classes. So subscribe, and you guys could go ahead and wait for that video to come out. And yeah, that's all for now. You guys could also check out my GitHub. It's on my link tree, which I have linked on my YouTube. So you guys should check that out if you want to see more examples of code. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.